youngest elected official in Troy's history. How about that? And I think under his direction, the city of Troy has had some of the largest growth in the city's history, especially with the announcement of the public supermarket. And that was he was very instrumental in the development, which is going to be our largest infrastructure road project to date. So very indeed quickly pushing to the forefront on economic development here in the city of Troy. And under his leadership, industries such as Lockheed Martin and CGI. I remember when we had our big grand opening, Jason, out here in the shopping center where CGI and Troy Online is right now. And boy, what a development that has been. And at least that is a big town and gown show for Troy University indeed. And appreciate the leadership that you've done in creating hundreds of jobs for the people in Troy, not only in Troy, but in Pike County as well. So with that introduction, Mayor Reeves, I'm going to turn it over to you, and look forward to hearing the heart of everything in the achievement that you've done for the city of Troy and Pike County. Thank you.
I appreciate the opportunity to be here today. I'd like, if it's okay, to one of the, I talk about and we'll talk about what's happening and what's going to happen. One of the things I don't probably talk about enough is how a lot of the things that are happening have a great deal to do with the fact that I was a student here, and how important it's been in my development, and I believe in the community's development, that I was a student here. A lot of people don't know this, and I don't talk about it too much, but I thought about it when I was coming down. I came down Farmer Street and stopped at the corner, and I had to wait at the stop sign for a while because there was somebody coming up Farmer, and I was turning left, and he was going straight, and of course he had the right of way, and I waited and waited, and eventually he came on across. But right there at that corner, there was a house many, many years ago. It was a house that the university provided housing to certain employees. I was born in 1972, so that's how long ago it was. My grandfather was the number 2 man at the physical plant way back then. And so when I came home from the hospital, I was my mother and father's oldest child, and you want help from the grandparents. So when I came home from the hospital, I came to that house. So literally the first place that I ever went besides the hospital was the campus of Troy University. And not only that, I don't think anybody's ever grown up around, or so much of their life was tied around this campus, maybe than mine. I grew up, my address as a I guess from early teens was 116 Highland Avenue. So I lived right next to the university. I went to the middle school, which is right across the street, and then I went to the high school, which is right across the street. The church that I grew up in, the First Presbyterian Church, is right across the street. Joined the National Guard, and the armory that I drilled in was right across the street. And when my grandparents lived in that house on Farmer Street, and then they, while they were building a home on East Street, which is right there where Pale comes across, that four-way stop is Pale and East, and they were one house over from there. So I literally grew up around this university, and I say all that to say this: I had no idea what Troy University had to offer. As growing up as a Troy kid, a lot of people said, well, I'm going to go off here and go off there and do this and do that. Coming in here, and it was a different world. It was so many different and unique and fulfilling experiences that I had here, that I literally had been across the street from and had no idea what was there to offer, what was here for me to learn. And so much of that development came through faculty, came through organizations. As I developed, I know I wouldn't be the man that I am today. I know that I wouldn't be able to deal with a lot of the things that I have to deal with today had it not been for things that I dealt with as a university student. One of the first leadership roles that I ended up with on campus was I was a fraternity president. And that was tough. There were a lot of things outside. That's where I really learned about there are things that are outside of your control that will affect you. And so if someone in the chapter did something that they shouldn't have done, then I was in the dean's office, or I was in the, I had to deal with that. And so I began to learn from those types of things, and the best way to prevent some of those things is through leadership and doing it beforehand. You cannot lead when you are constantly in crisis. So I learned a lot about that. I was ended up really uninterested in politics. I was interested in it, but had never thought about it. And had a friend that walked up to me in the quad. I was actually, to my grandmother's great chagrin, I was actually a bartender part of the time when I was in college, and I also worked as the weekend manager at the golf course when we had one. So there weren't a lot of people on campus that didn't know who I was, and just from because of where I worked, and had a friend come up and say, sign this and give me $5. And Dana, it was Wally Lowry. Wally walked up and handed me the form. He was the SGA clerk that year, and said, here's $5 and sign this form, and you're going to run for the SGA Senate. I said, okay, sounds good to me. And but once I got involved, and that's when I really began to meet so many different people from so many different backgrounds, from so many different areas, and interacting with those organizations. And I know every day that you deal with people really all over the world. And to me, that's just an amazing thing to think of everything that flows through Troy, Alabama, and Troy University from all around the world. Because back in the early 90s, we were talking about this becoming a global economy and a global workforce and lifelong learning and all those things when things began to really change. And Troy embraced that. As you all know, we were the first to really get involved in distance learning and a lot of those things. And I've been, as we were talking about earlier, I was a traditional student. The next year I actually was able to be elected SGA president, and that was the things that I got to do. I was telling Steve, I got to serve on the Student Publications Board, serve on disciplinary boards, serve on the Institutional Effectiveness Committee, which really came back to bite me because I eventually became an adult student because I got a job offer from the place that I was working. Probably it was in May of '95. So I stopped being a traditional student in May of '95 and didn't end up getting my degree until 2001. So I was one of those older students who, thought I knew a lot and dealt with a lot and did a lot of things. But that was a lot of fun. But that Institutional Effectiveness Committee, we were meeting, and there was a problem with getting students to take the Rising Junior test. And they didn't know how to get them to do it. They were, it was becoming a real problem, and it was affecting accreditation and things of that nature. And I was a young 20-something. I just said, well, I can solve that. You just don't let them graduate until they take it. Tell them they got to have it to graduate. And so, fast forward 7 years, and I had 2 children, working a full-time job, going to school, trying to get everything done. Got everything done, and somebody called me and said, you haven't taken this test and you can't graduate. And I remember, and I went to Dr. Angie Rowling's office, and I sat in a room for 2 hours, and I took that test. And I thought, you reap what you sow. And I did. And you know, and those are some of the little things that I learned so much about life, about organizations, about interacting with people, about writing and communicating, whether it was verbally or you know, in writing, you know, through my time at Troy. And so much of that was done not only through different faculty and staff members, but members of the administration. And it took me a long time to really learn how much I had learned. And I'm very proud of this school. You know, I love my hometown, and it's been, you know, it's been special to grow up here. I've had opportunities to leave, and just can't imagine doing it, because really Troy's a place where the world comes to your doorstep as much as probably anywhere else, certainly in Alabama and probably the Southeast. So there's a lot of pride in that, and having and understanding the town-gown relationship, understanding that the university, because there are people in the community that view the university sometimes as, they view it through the spectrum of, some of those kids don't know how to drive, or they make too much noise, or, you know, I'm trying to get to sleep. And there are certainly ways that you can look at it from that perspective. But when you look at the economic engine that the university is, when you look at the diversity of the people that it brings in, when you look at the jobs that are created, all of the economic impact in so many ways, it's just really impossible to quantify. So a lot of, I get a lot more credit than I deserve for a lot of these things. Were it not for the university and their relationship with the community, with the city, the things I learned from here. You mentioned CGI. That was truly a Troy University, Troy, Alabama partnership. And I can still remember, I've got a photograph that I need to blow up and hang up that someone took, but we weren't even supposed to get a look from CGI. And what ended up happening, a young girl from the University of Georgia who had graduated from there, they were looking at Auburn and Mobile, just outside of Montgomery, Prattville. She said, you know, why don't we run down and look at Troy? And they came down for just one afternoon, 2 members of the search committee. We brought an entire group together. And as we were talking earlier, one of the things that's so important about economic development and making those things happen is that we all work together as a team, the university, and the existing businesses. So when you can bring somebody in and they see those types of things, it shows them that, you know, this may be South Alabama, but you've got people doing things here that people aren't doing anywhere in the world. When you look at Lockheed Martin, CGI, the university, Sikorsky, KW Plastics, and all of their recycling, where they're on the cutting edge of many, many things. So just that opportunity. But the photograph I was talking about is we actually, the 2 people on the committee liked Troy so much that they wanted to try to bring the rest of the committee in who were flying into Mobile. And we got the use of a local business's plane, and so I flew down and picked them up. And there's a photograph of me talking with my hands very animatedly selling Troy and Troy University, 17th, and there's, you can see in the background that we're at 17,000 feet. So it's really a neat thing, and of course they ended up coming here, and it's been an excellent situation for the community and the schools. Just to talk about what's going on here, what some of the things that we're trying to accomplish and do. As I said the other day when I spoke in this room to the trustees and the foundation board, and I appreciate you mentioning Publix, I don't know if there was anything more popular that we could have done than bring, to find a way to bring Publix in here. I told them I couldn't, I'd get home from work and my kids would come to me when they were, younger. This had been 3, 4, 5 years ago. And they would say, Dad, you got to get a Publix. My teacher's asking me every day, when are we going to get a Publix? We got to get a Publix. And so it was not only the entire community and the university, it was it was my children. So one of the things we looked at, and I'm very proud that we did, and one thing that I learned was you don't always take someone's word or urban legend or folklore or whatever. We had been talking about connecting the Enza Road connector, running a road from Franklin Drive out to the Sportsplex, probably for 30 years. And I recall not long after I got elected, them talking about putting it in the highway department's plan, and it was going to be $25 or $30 million. And this is for one 2-lane road because of the topography of the ground. So very early in 2013, I just decided, we had a sewer easement down there, I just decided to drive down there and walk. And I stepped across this creek that was supposed to be so impassable. And I thought, and I just kept walking. And I walked until I got to the crest of the hill, and I saw Walmart, and I said, this is doable. And I started then very quietly. But when I met with Mary Dobbins at Publix, who was a real estate person, we were trying to sell her, but when I mentioned the roads and what we were going to do, I saw in her eyes that, we had finally, because it had been an effort for many years. So that was a huge thing, and I think that what those roads are going to do is that they brought really an excitement. If you ride down 231, which is very congested, which we're hoping these new roads from our traffic studies and whatnot are going to, some of that traffic problem is going to be alleviated. But there's a lot going on. The new Pennzoil location is being built. Max Federal Credit Union is being built. The largest new apartment complex, which is going to be geared not towards students, but toward young working professionals. And I think that's one thing that Troy has needed to work on, because if you're in school, you kind of got a niche, and if you're a little older and you've got kids and you go to the ball field, go to church, go to those kind of things, you've kind of got a niche. But for the young professional that's past college but not quite tuned into family, we need to do some work, and that's what we've been working on. That's really what our downtown push is about. We've been working very hard to try to develop downtown with some great partners, ones that have been there for generations like Birds and Douglas Brothers, but also the new ones like Sips and B. Graves, the clothing stores, the boutiques. I remember, as you all know, I grew up here, And, you know, the only place you could have lunch downtown for many years was at Bird's. If you wanted to go get a chicken salad or a pimento cheese sandwich, you could go in there. We've got enough restaurants now, you can eat somewhere different every day of the week, which a lot of people thought would never happen. So that revitalization and growing the university and the community together, really with University Park and where E. Troy and CGI are as a central piece and location, is very, very important to us. So I think we've started to get some momentum, and I'm working on some very big, you know, manufacturing industrial type prospects that will, you know, success breeds success, and I think that's something that Troy has done very well. And as we push to enroll more people, not only here but online, I think that's something that's very important. Having that, I believe, having that traditional college atmosphere doesn't only help what you're doing on campus, but it helps what you're doing around the world, because there's a real university at the end of it. And I think that, as we've probably seen, the bubble has sort of burst on some of these places that just sort of set up shop. So there's really something at the end of the rainbow when you're dealing with Troy, and it's you have to have been here for a while. I mean, when I think about the buildings and the infrastructure on campus and all those things, when I started the school here and what they are now, it's just beyond belief. But we really, what's important to us and what we're going to push with economic development and other things, and like I said, with the young professionals, that apartment complex is, I mean, they went and registered a $14 million building permit. I was looking at an old newspaper from 20 years ago, and there was a picture of Dr. Hawkins and Alec Whaley and the building official looking at a building permit that was the record for the city at that time, which was $10.5 million. So now you've got a private, and this is totally private money, has gone in next to the Hampton Inn, and they are building a very nice apartment complex for young professionals. So I think that's something that's going to continue to draw people to Troy, and there are a couple more on the drawing board. We've got we've got about a 30-acre retail development that's strongly looking at Troy. So there's just a sort of a buzz and a feel out there now that things are happening, and that can only happen by us investing the way we have. We put a lot of money in infrastructure, not only in road infrastructure and things of that nature, but in our water, electric, and sewer infrastructure, which the city owns, and Troy University is one of our biggest customers. It's very important. That's one of the things that I tell, with Alabama has got the lowest property taxes of any state in the continental United States. I think Hawaii's maybe lower, but I'm not certain about that. So a lot of the money that comes into Troy's government is coming through people who pay a utility bill and people who purchase things through sales tax. So even though students or faculty or whoever may not own property here, they're still a huge part of our tax base and the things that allow us to do the development that we've done. So I'm very excited about where we're going, and certainly couldn't have gotten there without help from the community, help from the university, help from the city council and the folks that work down there. Really just everybody coming together and working to make Troy better. And I think we're on the cusp of some of the greatest growth, certainly in the history of our city. And I think we're doing it in ways that aren't solely in one area. So the university's growing, the downtown's growing, 231's growing, some of these other developments are growing on the outskirts. And I think that's very important, that you have widespread and sustainable growth. Not to a point that you can't keep up with it, but I think what we've done is going to allow us to be sustainable, and it's a growth that we can continue to have. We presented a budget last night that was in excess of $70 million. For a city of Troy size, that's unheard of, really, because of our electric utilities. But I really believe one of the things that's so wonderful about us owning those utilities, we just finished a electric contract for our wholesale power, and starting January 1st of 2018, we will get a 20% reduction in our wholesale rate, possibly over the period of time of that contract, which is a 5-year period. You could end up seeing not only a savings, but an infusion of cash into the system of more than $20 million. That's bigger than the hospital trust fund that we have that's been so good to the city. So we'll be able to invest that money, we'll be able to use that money in keeping taxes and rates at least at the same level they are now, if not lowering. Also, being able to invest in the community, in the quality of life, in those types of things, because that's really the key. A lot of people, we were talking about the paper mill in Zachary. You know, if you worked at the paper mill, you had to live near the paper mill, and that's, you know, we live in a different world now, and people can choose so many times where they live. And so that's why quality of life is so important. And the university brings a fabric to our quality of life, really, that the foundation of everything else is built on top of. So, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if, you know, in the next 5 years that the city of Troy doesn't have a budget of $100 million. I wouldn't have believed that, I couldn't fathom that growing up. So that's really important. And it wouldn't have happened if it hadn't been for this university, if it hadn't been for the community and us embracing, working together. And I think we're on the way, I believe, to having 10,000 students enrolled here on campus, and between 25 and 30,000 people in the community. And I think we can get to a point where we've still got that small town feel, but we have all the amenities that somebody would want and need, or we're in proximity to them. So we're excited about all that. But anytime I get the opportunity to talk about the community and this university is very exciting for me. It's not very hard for me to do. So we appreciate what you do. We appreciate the university. I appreciate the opportunity to be here today. And, you know, we will answer our phone and answer our door if you got questions for us. So if something comes up, you know, shoot us an email. Whatever you need, we want to be responsive, and customer service is a big part of what we do, and we believe that our taxpayers and our community members are our customers. So we want to provide you with good customer service.